car that made a 10-minute chase scene the most studied piece of automotive filmmaking in history. No music, no cutaways, just a Highland Green Mustang and a Dodge Charger absolutely destroying the streets of San Francisco. For 50 years, nobody knew where it ended up. Then a family in Tennessee opened a garage door, and the whole world lost its mind. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle, where we find out what really happened to the cars that shaped the culture. The car before the film. Before we get into what happened after the cameras stopped, we need to talk about what the car actually was before anyone put a film reel near it. Because this is not a case of a production designer picking something off a lot and slapping some paint on it. The 1968 Ford Mustang GT Fastback was a specific choice made by a man who understood cars the way most people understand breathing. Ford produced the Fastback body style starting in 1965. And by '68, the first-generation Mustang had reached what a lot of people consider its visual peak. The long hood, the short rear deck, the aggressive roofline that slopes all the way to the tail. It is one of the genuinely timeless American shapes. You can put one next to a current car, and it holds its own without apology. For Bullitt, Warner Brothers contracted with Ford directly. The studio needed cars that could handle the demands of a prolonged, high-speed chase sequence through the streets of San Francisco without falling apart. Ford provided two 1968 Mustang GT Fastbacks, both finished in a factory color called Highland Green. A dark, slightly muted green that reads almost black under certain light and catches a deep emerald tone in direct sun. If you've spent any time trying to describe that color to someone who hasn't seen the film, you already know it resists description. It just looks right, that's the only honest answer. The two cars carried sequential serial numbers. One would become the hero car, the one used for close-up work, the interior sequences, anything requiring the camera to actually live with the machine. The other would be the stunt car, built to absorb the punishment the chase sequence was going to demand. Both started as genuine Mustang GT 390 fastbacks, equipped from the factory with the 390 cubic inch V8. That is the baseline. What they became was a different matter entirely, and that story belongs to a man named Max Balchowsky. Steve McQueen, the man who actually drove it. Let's pause here for a second and address something, because the name Steve McQueen gets attached to this car so completely that it's easy to forget he didn't build it. He didn't own it initially, and he wasn't supposed to be doing half of what he did behind the wheel during filming. The studio had professional stunt drivers for that. McQueen had other ideas. Steve McQueen was born in Indianapolis in 1930. By the time Bullitt went into production in 1968, he was arguably the biggest movie star on the planet. And he was also, without any studio press release required, a genuinely accomplished racing driver. He had competed at Sebring. He had run motorcycles in the International 6 Days Trial. He had done things behind a wheel that had nothing to do with Hollywood and everything to do with the fact that the man simply could not be near a fast vehicle without needing to know exactly what it was capable of. When McQueen took on the role of San Francisco detective Frank Bullitt, he had creative control over the production. He used it. He pushed for a chase sequence that would be filmed practically at real speed on real streets. No undercranking the camera to make slow cars look fast. No cutting away at the moment of truth. He hired legendary stunt coordinator and driver Kerry Lofton to handle the most extreme moments, but McQueen himself was behind the wheel for more of that chase than the studio was entirely comfortable with. He could tell the difference. He wanted the film to be able to tell the difference too. That insistence is why Bullitt holds up. You are watching a real car driven by a real driver at real speed through real streets. The camera knows it. The audience feels it. McQueen understood something that a lot of filmmakers in that era hadn't fully absorbed yet, which is that an audience can sense authenticity even when they can't articulate why. The chase in Bullitt doesn't feel like a movie, it feels like a document, and that starts with who was driving, building the cars for the chase. Now, let's talk about what Balchowsky actually did to those cars, because the stock Mustang GT 390 was a capable machine, but it was not built for what was about to happen to it. Max Balchowsky was a Los Angeles-based mechanic and fabricator who had built his reputation on taking ordinary cars and making them capable of things that should have been impossible. He was the kind of man who could listen to an engine and tell you what it was thinking. Warner Brothers brought him in to prepare both Mustangs for the production, and the work he did was comprehensive. The suspension was the priority. San Francisco is not a flat city. Anyone who has driven it knows that those hills create genuine airtime under the right conditions, and the chase sequence was specifically designed to use that terrain. Balchowsky stiffened the suspension throughout, reinforced the chassis at the critical stress points, and set the cars up to handle the repeated compression and extension that comes with cresting hills at speed. The cars needed to land and keep going. They needed to do it take after take. The engines were rebuilt for sustained high-speed running, not just peak power. The cooling systems were upgraded. Balchowsky also lowered both cars, dropping the ride height to tighten the handling and improve the visual stance, which mattered because this car was going to be on screen constantly, and it needed to look as aggressive as it actually was. The interior of the hero car was left largely stock, which is important. McQueen wanted it to look like a car a working detective actually drove. Not a race car, not a prop. A car with a story already in it. The only notable addition inside was the shoulder harness, which was not standard equipment on a street Mustang in 1968, and which McQueen absolutely needed, given what he was planning to do with the vehicle. The stunt car received the same mechanical preparation and a full roll cage. The hero car did not have a cage, which in retrospect says something about either McQueen's confidence or his general attitude toward personal safety, possibly both. The chase itself. The chase sequence in Bullitt runs approximately 10 minutes and 40 seconds, from the moment McQueen turns the tables on the Charger, tailing him to the moment the pursuit ends. 10 minutes and 40 seconds. To put that in context, most chase sequences in films of that era ran 2 to 3 minutes before cutting away to something else. The filmmakers behind Bullitt looked at that convention and apparently decided it was someone else's problem. In the context of American cinema, those 10 minutes represent something close to a founding document for the car chase as a legitimate cinematic form. Everything that came after it, Vanishing Point, The French Connection, The 7-Ups, Ronin, every serious chase sequence that directors have constructed in the 56 years since exists in conversation with what Peter Yates put on screen in 1968. Some of those films are extraordinary. None of them buried it. Director Peter Yates and director of photography William Fraker approached the sequence with a camera strategy that was ambitious to the point of being slightly insane. They mounted cameras directly on both cars. They ran chase vehicles alongside the action. They positioned fixed cameras at key points throughout the streets. They used every angle available to them and then went looking for more. The goal was not to make the chase look fast. The goal was to make the audience feel like they were in the car. There is a difference, and Fraker understood it completely. They had approximately 3 weeks to film the sequence. The streets of San Francisco were not fully closed during production. The production had permits and coordination with the city, but real traffic remained part of the environment throughout filming, which means that a significant portion of what you see on screen, the civilian vehicles in the background, the pedestrians at the edges of the frame, the general chaos of a living city going about its business, was not staged. It was just there. Yates used it. Here is something worth knowing if you have watched the chase carefully and more than once, which, honestly, if you haven't, close this video right now and go do that first. I'll wait. The same green Volkswagen Beetle appears multiple times across different points in the sequence. The production couldn't close enough of the streets to keep it out of frame consistently. Rather than halt filming and attempt reshoots, Yates kept it in. It appears, disappears, and reappears with a cheerful indifference to continuity that has delighted film nerds for decades. That Beetle has its own fan following at this point, and it deserves it. There are also 4 hubcaps that fly off the Mustang during the chase. The Mustang only had 4 hubcaps. The continuity of hubcap loss across shots is not consistent. Nobody on the production appeared to lose sleep over this. They were busy doing something considerably more important than counting hubcaps. The actual speeds reached during filming have been debated seriously for decades. Precise measurement is difficult given the camera work and the editing, but analysis based on location distances and filming schedules puts both cars at sustained speeds well in excess of 100 miles per hour on public streets in a major American city. This was not a closed course. This was not a controlled environment. This was San Francisco on a regular day, with a Highland Green Mustang and a black Dodge Charger running through it at speeds that would end careers, and possibly lives if anything went wrong. Kerry Lofton handled the most extreme moments. McQueen was behind the wheel for a larger portion of the sequence than the studio was entirely comfortable with. including sections that the insurance department would very much prefer had never been documented. The result is something that has been studied in film schools, referenced by directors across 6 decades, and replicated in more films than anyone has properly counted. Nobody has quite managed to capture what makes the original feel real. The reason is simple: it is real, and the car that made it real spent the next 50 years in a garage in Tennessee waiting for the world to catch up. After the cameras stopped filming on Bullitt, wrapped in the summer of 1968, the film released in October of that year and did exactly what nobody at Warner Brothers had dared to fully predict. It became one of the highest-grossing films of the year. It turned Frank Bullitt into a cultural archetype, the kind of character that doesn't need a sequel because the original is already complete. And it made the Highland Green Fastback one of the most recognizable vehicles in the history of American cinema. And then Warner Brothers sold the cars, and just like that, the trail goes quiet. This is the part of the story that should genuinely bother anyone who cares about automotive history. Not because what the studio did was unusual, because it wasn't. The handling of the 2 Bullitt Mustangs after production wrapped was completely standard practice for 1968, which is exactly the problem. Standard practice in 1968 meant no preservation order, no archiving, no conversation about what these vehicles represented or might represent in 20 years. It meant treating 2 purpose-built movie cars the same way a rental company treats a return vehicle. You process it and you move on. The stunt car went first. It had been used hard, which is a considerable understatement given what Carrie Lofton had put it through across 3 weeks on the streets of San Francisco. The car had sustained real damage during production, the kind that doesn't buff out. It was sold to a private buyer in the Los Angeles area, and within a few years, it was crushed. The exact timeline has been disputed across various accounts and forum threads for decades. But the endpoint has not. The stunt Mustang is gone. Whatever VIN it carried, whatever history it held, whatever story was in that chassis, it was compacted into a metal cube somewhere in Southern California, and that was the end of it. I'll be honest, that one stings a little every time I think about it. The hero car had a different fate, though it came closer to the same ending than most people realize. After filming wrapped, Warner Brothers held onto the Hero Mustang for a period and used it for promotional work. Studio press appearances, publicity material, the kind of thing that made sense when you had a film built around a car that audiences were already responding to. And during this window, Steve McQueen made his move. He wanted the car. He had driven it, he knew what it was. And by all accounts, he made a genuine approach to the studio to purchase it. Warner Brothers said no. Why exactly they said no, while simultaneously failing to preserve the car in any meaningful way, is a question that does not have a satisfying answer. Sometime around 1970, the Hero Mustang was sold to a private buyer named Robert Kiernan in New Jersey. No ceremony, no documentation flagged for preservation, no studio archivist pulling the VIN and marking it for the record. Just a title transfer. A car changing hands the way cars change hands quietly, without anyone in the room fully understanding what they were letting go of, or what it was going to take to find it again. The 50-year Mr. For the next 5 decades, the Hero Bullitt Mustang existed in rumor, legend, and a persistent fog of conflicting claims that would have driven a lesser enthusiast completely out of their mind. The myth industry around this car was substantial. By the 1980s and 90s, the Bullitt Mustang had achieved a kind of holy grail status in the collector car community, which meant that every few years a Highland Green Fastback would surface with a story attached to it. Usually the story didn't hold, the VIN didn't match. The documentation was thin, the provenance dissolved under scrutiny. The most significant false lead came in 1990 when a Highland Green Fastback appeared at the Barrett-Jackson auction in Scottsdale, being presented as the actual Bullitt Hero car. It attracted enormous attention and serious money. It was not the car. The true Hero car's VIN was documented in production records, and the Barrett-Jackson example didn't match. The car that sold that day was almost certainly a genuine 1968 Mustang GT Fastback in Highland Green, which is not nothing, but it was not Bullitt. McQueen's son Chad had been searching for the real car for years. He knew his father had tried to buy it from the studio. He knew the basic outline of the Kiernan sale. What he didn't have was the car. He had letters. He had production documentation. He had VIN records. He did not have the Mustang, and for a long time, that appeared to be where the story would end. Another legendary car lost to time and private ownership, and the general indifference of an era that didn't know what it was throwing away. The Tennessee Garage. And then in 2018, a family came forward. The Kiernan family had owned the car since Robert Kiernan purchased it around 1970. When Robert passed away, the car went to his son, Sean. Sean Kiernan had grown up with the car in the family. He knew what it was. He had kept it. He had driven it occasionally. He had not restored it, had not sold it, and had not made a single public statement about it for nearly 50 years. Let me just say that again. This family owned what was arguably the most famous movie car in American history, and they kept their mouths shut about it for half a century. That is a level of discretion that is honestly almost difficult to comprehend in the current era. No Instagram posts, no forum hints, no quiet approaches to auction houses, nothing. The car sat in a garage in Tennessee, and the Kiernans went about their lives. When Sean Kiernan finally brought the car forward in 2018, he did it through the right channels. He reached out to the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, which had the production documentation needed to verify the VIN. The match was confirmed. The car Sean Kiernan had been driving to the grocery store on occasion was definitively, verifiably, the Hero Mustang from Bullitt. The car's condition when it was revealed was extraordinary and not in the way you might expect. It wasn't pristine. It wasn't a concours restoration. It was original. The Highland green paint was worn, oxidized in places, carrying 50 years of honest life on its surface. The interior was tired. There was a Mexican blanket on the back seat, which for some reason has become one of the most discussed details in the entire story, and honestly, I get it. There is something incredibly human about that detail. The car had been used. It had been kept. It had survived as itself, rather than as a showpiece. Sean Kiernan drove it to the Detroit Auto Show in January of 2018. He drove it there. That's who this family was about this car. The auction and what came after. In January of 2020, the Hero Bullitt Mustang crossed the block at Makeham's auction in Kissimmee, Florida. The room knew what it was looking at. The bidding knew it too. The car sold for $3,740,000. Let that number sit for a second. That is not a Shelby Cobra number. That is not a Ferrari at Pebble Beach number. That is a Ford Mustang number. A car that Ford built on an assembly line in Dearborn, Michigan. That a family in Tennessee used for grocery runs. That spent the better part of 5 decades under a Mexican blanket in a garage. $3,740,000. For context, the previous auction record for any Ford Mustang had been held by a Shelby GT 500, a legitimate, documented, historically significant car in its own right. The Bullitt Mustang walked past that number without looking back. It became, at that moment, the most expensive Mustang ever sold at public auction. And honestly, if you understand what the car is and what it represents, the number doesn't even feel surprising. It feels inevitable. The buyer chose to remain anonymous. That decision has, predictably, done nothing to slow down the speculation. Forums have theories. Collectors have opinions. A handful of people probably think they know. Nobody has confirmed anything publicly, and until they do, the identity of the current owner is just one more unanswered question in a story that has been full of them since 1970. What the sale did was close a very specific chapter, the 50-year search chapter, the is it real chapter, the where is it now chapter. Sean Kiernan brought the car forward, the documentation held, the world got its answer, and then the hammer came down and the car moved on again. That is how these stories tend to go. The mystery resolves and immediately generates a new one. What happens to it next is genuinely unknown. A museum is possible. Continued private custody is equally possible. Another auction block, years or decades from now, is not out of the question. The Bullitt Mustang has a way of resurfacing exactly when the world has almost stopped expecting it. Given its history, betting against another appearance seems unwise. What is not in question is what the car represents. The Bullitt Mustang is not simply a vehicle that appeared in a film. It is the physical object at the center of one of the defining moments in the relationship between American car culture and American cinema. It is the car Steve McQueen drove when Steve McQueen was Steve McQueen. It is the reason Highland Green became a color with meaning beyond its paint code. It is the reason Ford has put the Bullitt name on special edition Mustangs in 2008, 2019, and likely will again, because that name still moves cars 56 years after the film was released. Two 1968 Mustang GT fastbacks went into the production of Bullitt. One was destroyed. One spent 50 years in a Tennessee garage under a Mexican blanket before selling for nearly $4 million. That is the story. A car that survived because a family understood what they had and simply chose to keep it rather than cash it in, right up until the moment they decided the world was ready to see it again. If this one hit different, drop a comment below. Tell me what you think that anonymous buyer is doing with it right now. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to American Muscle. We go where the cars are. We'll see you in the next lane.